What's up, Doug? I got something you never reviewed and you can never review. In the world of collector cars, money can buy anything except a mail truck. You can't buy one. The United States Postal Service won't sell you a used LLV, but where there's a will, there's a loophole. Grumman, the same defense contractor who built the F-6F Hellcat and the F-14 Tomcat, accepted a contract from the USPS in 1987 to manufacture a replacement for the aging Jeep CJ7 mail carrier. The name of the replacement was Long Life Vehicle, meant to last for 25 years with only oil changes and other routine maintenance. In 1995, Grumman's contract ended, but they had an unspecified number of units left that the USPS didn't want. So what Grumman did is they titled all those LLVs as 1995 Chevy S10s because the frame is mostly an S10, riveted VIN plates on the dash, and sold them to state and local municipalities in a fire sale. Those select 1995 LLVs can be purchased by private individuals because, according to registration databases, these are real cars, but they don't drive like real cars, or even S10 pickups. A Grumman LLV drives like a phone booth. They drive like Rubbermaid tote bins hot glued to Walmart skateboards. This drives like an unprepared freshman giving a social studies report on Ponce de Leon. No, wait. Can I start over? I guess that's it, so, how's everybody doing? He realizes his whole report is only 45 seconds, so he starts doing crowd work. An LLV has great visibility, and the wind mounts you and uhs you more. And every surface is government. Heavy switches. Everything is just like drilled and screwed in. But the best part of an LLV is the door latch. This heavy, industrial door latch that is meant to be slammed over and over and over again for 30 years. All I wanted to do is just drive and open the door and feel a heavy door just and then open the latch and let it slide forward again. Driving a mail truck is an ice cream truck for adults. Because I grew up with these vehicles in the background. They appeared like perennials in the spring, and they supplemented the rural carriers, but always these vehicles were in the background, 50 yards away. Up close, an LLV is bigger than you think, and taller, and you can crawl through the whole thing, and the handbrake is on the dash for ergonomics. The whole reason the handbrake is on the dash, so you can take your hand off the wheel, set the handbrake and slide the door open. Slide the door closed, reset the handbrake with the same arm as it's on its way to the steering wheel. Everything else, there's nothing really is ergonomic about this car except for the handbrake and door latch position. The suspension is long and soft, and when you drive one, well, when you own one, your life changes. Just ask Caleb.
Hi, my name is Caleb C. This is my 1994 Grumman LLV. I bought this about a year ago now, back last June in 2021. My reasons for buying it are basically because I had the opportunity to. I've always wanted a mail truck. I always thought they were really cool, and I was always really upset that they're not really available to the public, I suppose. So this one come up for auction. It was owned by Lakewood Water District. They were using it, as far as I know, to carry around their tools and meters, pipes. It went up to government auction on GovDeals, and I saw it up for sale, and I grabbed it. Particularly fast cars don't really interest me. Particularly expensive cars don't necessarily interest me. I just like different, unique.
Quirky.
Yeah, and the mail truck definitely fits the quirky category well.
What's an interesting feature that you really enjoy about your quirky vehicle?
I gotta say, the feature I enjoy most is just the fact you can drive with the doors open. Legally speaking, they latch open. You can lock them open even, which makes it, at least in Washington State, legal to drive with the doors open. Makes for a nice windy experience. Especially around town, you're more kind of open. People will sometimes shout at you and just, hey, how's it going? Or I take this to work every day. I drive, any drive-through I go to. Grocery stores are always a blast because there's tons of space in the back.
What would be the top speed for something like this? That funny, huh?
Well, I don't know how much I should say that on public record. However, I have gotten it over 90 once. So, downhill, wind in my favor for over a mile of being floored down the highway. So it is capable, but it wasn't happy about it. Yeah, I'd say usually on a good day, I don't take it over 75. It's already, pretty loud and pretty floored by that point anyways.
But it's highway capable.
Oh, it's highway capable by far. It may not have an overdrive, but the engine's not necessarily lacking.
What would be some of maybe your favorite stories or moments interacting with the public?
Man, the one that set the tone for this truck in particular was the second day I owned it. Was the very morning after I bought it. I had taken it to an Ace Hardware to buy some nice stainless bolts to put the license plates on and whatnot. And as I was sitting there out front looking up what I need to get while I'm inside, old man comes out on his walker, and he's just giddy as can be. He's smiling ear to ear. Is that your mail truck? Yes, sir. He's like, you bought that? I'm like, yes, sir. He's like, well, hot damn. And he was just so excited. Apparently, he used to drive the mail Jeeps, and these were just coming out as he was just leaving, working for USPS. He never actually got a chance to really experience them, but he thought they were the coolest thing, and he was just happy to see one up close and experience it. I totally offered to let him drive it, but he's like, I don't drive anymore. I'm like, all right. But that, I believe, overwhelmingly set the tone for having owned this truck. It's overwhelmingly positive. I've had only one person have any negative response to it. Most people just want to ask questions, want to know if it's personal, want to know if I'm just delivering mail at 2 a.m. or whatever it may be. But it's people are always smiling ear to ear. Well, I think I'm up to like 8 free coffees I've gotten in coffee drive-thrus from people just randomly deciding to buy me a coffee just because they see me around, or they're just like, yeah, get the guy in the mail truck one. It's always a blast. I found out when it snowed this year, it actually has a limited slip. It drives sideways. It's absolute blast. It does not stop this car though. Like, it could be raining, it could be snowing. I got stuck in the mud slightly once, but it got itself right back out after making a mess. Yeah, you can't stop it.
What's the capacity, like how much load can it carry?
Exactly 1,000 pounds, if I remember right. This thing was built to an engineering T. Like, they gave a minimum spec that it had to meet for federal requirements, and Grumman's like, here it is. You get exactly that. It is exactly 7 foot by 7 foot by 14 foot. And if you measure it, it comes down to like 0.03 of an inch. The one I get questioned about a lot is, am I going to LS swap it? And the answer is, maybe. I mean, it would be a nice, reliable drivetrain, not modified, just stock, It'd get up to a modern fuel injection system, probably better gas mileage, enough power to get itself around a lot easier. But am I going to build a drag car out of it? No. Am I going to go race it? Probably not. It does not have air conditioning, no. You do have big windows you can open. However, the heater, they did have a update for it, and I do have it installed. It's a bigger heater core made out of brass and copper rather than the little one it would have came with originally. So the heater works well, like heat output wise, but it's not very well insulated of a truck anyways, so the effect is negligible. It's nice when you're parked, and once you get moving, you're probably just gonna be wearing a jacket anyways.
So you kind of have to go prepared for different kind of weather conditions. It's not the most comfortable ride.
I don't personally mind it. I don't mind the cold though, but are you freezing in here? No. I mean, the door's shut, the window's shut. It's not like wind's not blowing in, but does it get nice and toasty? No. Not at all. It'll stay warm, and it'll definitely stay above freezing, but you're don't expect to be sweating in your car in the middle of winter. The heaviest I've done would be, I did 500 pounds of cinder blocks the other day. It never has ridden better in its life. With the suspension loaded down, it actually drove really smooth and really well. Almost like it was meant to. The first thing I did when I got it was spark plugs. I did an oil change, and it was the worst oil I've ever seen in the engine by far. Done wires. I just did the shocks, and it was desperately needed. The shocks came apart the moment I took them out of the car. That just pulled apart. They were all original to the vehicle. Air filters, PCV valve. I forget a few other little things here and there. Just standard maintenance items. Nothing majorly has been broken. Nothing that wouldn't wear out on any other car with 160,000 miles. But probably items that should have been replaced at least 60,000 ago.
You planning on keeping this vehicle like long term?
Yeah, no, I mean, just on the way up here, I stopped at a Subway and someone offered to buy the car off me. I am not. That's why I told him I'm not selling this. I'm sorry. Like I know I cannot get another one. I'm not wanting to get rid of it. I have no intention to get rid of it. The best offer I've gotten so far was $10,000 for it from the guy who drives ice cream trucks, and he wanted to convert it to an ice cream truck. And I told him no several times actually, because he really wouldn't take no for an answer. But no, people want them. Because they're pretty much unobtainium, because they're a lot more practical than the older mail trucks. But you can't get them.
There are many who will tell you that the most respectable job is a government job. Not the kind you have to run for office and mortgage your soul to get. I'm talking something federal, with a hint of authority to it. But not so much authority that you're unapproachable in your community. You tell people you're collecting a government pension, and the dads line up around the corner with attaboys and daughters' phone numbers. Even as the United States Postal Service experiences an unprecedented decline, there's still something about mail carriers that inspires trust. Because even in the digital age, they carry with them tactile forms of communication for people who find solace in greeting cards and reassurance in paperwork. And long before then, you'd have adults scheduling their entire day around the arrival of the mailman. Oh, we can't lock the screen door yet. The mailman hasn't come. But what happens when you strip away all those reassuring signifiers? What happens when a mail truck is no longer for carrying mail? On one hand, it's hard to imagine wanting your own mail truck for any other reason but the novelty of making people believe you're a mailman. Yet, as Caleb explained, and the internet reinforced, it's a felony to impersonate a mail carrier. So you won't see any USPS logos, and you won't see Caleb or anyone in this thing dressed as a mail carrier or approaching mailboxes. And the only possible Grumman LLVs that you can get your hands on are the 1995 surplus models that were never sold to the USPS at all. You see that this vehicle was given a generic livery, just this stripe on the side. Now, Caleb bought this off a government auction site, because the story of this is that it was sold to like a water authority, and then they were done with it. It was just bought by somebody, and then it went to another site, and then that's where Caleb got it. And even when he bought it, the people at the auction said, We better not find out you're gonna go out there and play mailman. And Caleb has to correct bystanders who immediately assume he's a postal worker. Grumman LLV, sponsored by an Old Testament disdain for insubordination. This vehicle communicates a certain prestige to it, because some carriers have to hoof it on their routes, while other people get to make mounted deliveries in a Grumman LLV. But the difference seems arbitrary. Whether walking on the sidewalk or riding in an LLV, you're not getting air conditioning or much heat. And for a car whose anachronism stands for long life vehicle, these were prone to all sorts of problems. For example, when below 2 gallons of gas, this truck stumbles because there are no baffles in the fuel tank. And the tank is so wide and flat that a turn will pull all the gas to one side and throw off the weight distribution. The LLV's design also posed a fire risk due to the washer fluid line being above the fuse box, a design flaw in search of a lawsuit not just from injuries but from any mail that might go up in smoke that could contain everything from time-sensitive documents to cash money. They didn't even come with a spare tire or jack, just instructions in the manual that says contact your supervisor. Now, all the 1995 models have a 2.2-liter General Motors LN2 engine, part of the GM 122 engine line, rather than the iconic 2.5-liter Iron Duke every other year got. The LN2 engine was also found in the 2nd and 3rd gen Chevy Cavalier, and all LLVs share a chassis from a 1982 Chevrolet S10 Blazer, along with front suspension and instrument cluster. But the design is by a government contractor, though. So if you're wondering why this has the body of an underfunded local museum, there you go. On the good end, fuel economy is around 15 to 16 miles per gallon. Caleb got it as high as 18 once, but now he averages about 14. I mean, it's not too bad for an archaic engine and a vehicle with no overdrive that never leaves the city. Now, because this was previously owned by a water authority, it has a crappy toolbox in the back that was mounted with self-tappers. And while this is supposed to have high-load truck tires, it instead has passenger/light truck tires. Early models had tire pressure decals above all the wheel wells, but that was dropped by the time this version came around. The early 90s is when also all the extra mirrors were added. The driver's seat swivels, which is neat, but the passenger seat is not called a passenger seat. It's called the observer seat. That one cannot be moved or adjusted at all. For as practical as these were intended to be, I don't know if they were necessarily any better than the Jeep DJ/CJ-5s that they were intended to replace as the de facto residential mail delivery vehicle. Now granted, the LLV hauls a lot more than a Jeep, requiring less trips back to the post office. And while these things were made to last a quarter of a century, a later revision added another 6 years to that lifespan, so you could now rely on these things to run for 3 decades. But what kind of quality are you really getting here? The maintenance alone to keep these things running costs a fortune. It's a government vehicle. What keeps it running? Money. In 2009 alone, the United States Postal Service spent $524 million repairing their Grumman fleet. It was probably more annoying in the 90s since GM Parks catalogs for these things were all on microfiche. Now we're in 2022, and Oshkosh Defense has won the contract to design the next fleet for the next 10 years, with the car currently known as the Next Generation Delivery Vehicle, NGDV. It's expected to have 165,000 units manufactured over the duration of the contract, but it's hard to imagine them having the same effect as these Grummans. With the Postal Service in decline, and with more and more people going paperless for all their bills and communication, the new trucks will probably be coded different in the public imagination. They won't mean what they meant before. Rather than a transmission of adult responsibilities, they run the risk of becoming an anachronism, representing a time that seems more idyllic the farther we get from it, despite those times having tons of problems of their own. Because when you reach a certain age and acquire a sentimental mindset, you get horny for the past in a way that eliminates all of its faults. So that mail trucks, as simplistic as these, are viewed through a Vaseline-covered lens. And the photographer is some guy who hasn't missed a letter on an eye exam since the 3rd grade. But don't fall to the temptations of nostalgia. The past was good, but that's where it belongs. The Grumman LLVs were great for their time, but I can't say they haven't outlived their usefulness. And they certainly don't belong in civilian hands. Because even if every person who had one was as responsible as Caleb, I doubt many would enjoy driving these. Yet there's a rose-colored allure to something as charmingly outdated as a Grumman LLV. But nostalgia lies sometimes. Look, the past is a Mario Kart blue shell. No matter how far ahead you get, it's always going to come after you to knock you back. You watch the world pass you by, as you sit there reminiscing about when you were ahead in life, when things weren't so difficult, forgetting just how hard it was to get into the lead in the first place. Owning a Grumman LLV might seem like a blast, but it's maybe half an afternoon of enjoyment at most, before you're wondering why you ever wanted to drive one at all. Of course, it's not the worst car we've ever done. This is functional. A Grumman LLV is function, nothing more and no style. But then, being a functional workhorse was all it was ever meant to be. I have some closing thoughts here. If you find and buy one of these 1995 civilian LLVs, don't impersonate a postal worker. It's a federal crime, and you'll go to federal pound-me prison. And that includes not correcting residents who assume you are. The Grumman LLV, the more I hung around it, will become a lure for weak people who want to present as magisterial. This is a lure for people that, rather than empowering themselves through discipline, exercise, clean eating, clean language, they'll solve their problems by driving around in the vehicular equivalent of a high visibility vest, a hard hat, and an aluminum clipboard. The type of people who get a thrill about sneaking into a public building or an office space pretending to be a contractor. They rather cosplay as someone who has their life together rather than get their life together. But being around a Grumman LLV is like hiding behind the altar at church or looking in your teacher's desk. There's nothing there. It's just a bunch of pens and papers and letters and envelopes like everything else. But it's the thrill of going somewhere you're not supposed to. Being inside a mail truck, you're not allowed to be in there. You're not allowed to drive this thing. But now you can. It's a terrible truck, and anybody who had to work with one of these can attest that they're pieces of crap. But it's a forbidden piece of crap. It's like getting Yingling beer outside of its distribution network. It's just Schuylkill County pea water. But because other states can't get it, woo!
Another day, deliver mail as a human dog treat. In rain or sleet, in sun or snow, until my rounds are complete. I used to walk until I got my own Grumman LLV. It might not seem like much, but it's still a boxy gem to me. Do-do-do, do-do-do-do-do.
You looking at my ears? Stop looking at my ears!